everyone, to this first of three classes on music, the evolution of music, following on from last week's class on sound. So it's going to be quite an interesting journey, I think. And of course, the fourth ray of music, art, harmony, harmony through conflict, as it's also called, is the ray immediately associated with music. Mercury and the moon are the rulers. And the Tibetan says in esoteric psychology too, the art of music will be the next approach nearer to the truth and to the revelation of the emerging beauty. The art of the painter and of the sculpture will follow later. None of this is the art of expressing ideas creatively, which will be the glory of the Aquarian age. So music will come first on this fourth ray cycle, which is going to be starting in 2 years' time. I have often said that it started a few decades ago for those who are attuned to it, but 2025, after 2025, we're told the fourth ray will come into incarnation once again, slowly. So the new forms of music will start to emerge in the next few decades. Words today express the inner emotion, or best expressed, we're told, and this is related to the Ray 3 cycle. So, of course, music is a way to heal the emotions and to evoke the emotions, and has so many different strands or themes associated with it. In future, the intuition will develop by knowledge of sound vibration and higher mathematics. A lot of musicians say that music is mathematics, or mathematics is music. So Ray 4 is apparently the ray of mathematical exactitude. Ray 7 is the ray of geometry. There are several rays associated with the rays. Ray 3 has a mathematical expression as well, but they're all different types of mathematics. So here we have a picture of Mercury, the winged messenger, with wings in his helmet and his caduceus in hand, and wings in his feet, of course, winged feet. The ruler of the fourth ray, Mercury, the messenger. Of course, the moon as co-ruler of the fourth ray relates to the emotions, and also the higher emotions when considering the moon veiling a sacred planet like Neptune or something like that. Neptune exoterically in astrology has a lot to do with music. Here we have Orpheus, who was allegedly the bodhisattva in ancient times, about 8,000 years ago. I think it was during the age of Taurus. His music could charm the wild animals of the forest, and even streams would pause and trees bend a little closer to hear his sublime singing. Well, there's a little bit of literary, flexibility there. But he was apparently the world teacher at that time, bodhisattva. And you can see him playing on the ancient version of the harp. There are various names for this. I think a more ancient name is zither, and one of the first stringed instruments. So Neptune, Venus, and Taurus are all related to music, and Hermes, or Mercury, is related to music and poetry. Mercury is the muse in many ways. Music is a builder and destroyer, and will be recognized. Music as a builder and destroyer will be recognized in the laws of levitation and rhythmic movement in all forms. A soprano singer can shatter a glass. Noise, in fact, creates the new pollution now. There's ultrasound for healing. There's the manipulation of matter through sound. And they have new sound weapons now that have been used in a minor way in the last few decades. But So we can see the various creative and destructive uses of sound. The Tibetan says that Ray 4 will be coming to fruition when music produces warmth, stimulation, or when pictures glow, revealing the subjective within the objective. The main function of the Ray 4 Lord is creation of beauty, producing sounds, colours, and word music, which are all the expression of the original idea. So this century, there will be a reawakening of all the arts. This is a 500-year Renaissance period too, that is picking up on the Renaissance of the 1600s in Europe, or 14 to 1600 approximately, when Ray 4 cycle was more in evidence then, and countries like Italy that were conditioned by the fourth ray, and later on Germany, expressed themselves through art and music. From Letters on Occult Meditation, the Tibetan says, through sound, the aspirant is aware of success. He follows his usual form of meditation. He perseveres from day to day and works on all the three planes over the work to be done. He continuously raises his vibration and aspires in the needed endeavour, coupling all interior effort to the external life of loving service. With someone meditation, he will suddenly become aware of a note of music that seems to be sounded within his head or to emanate from his heart. It will not be evoked by the sounding of the sacred word, which word, when sounded by the man on a certain key, may call forth a musical response from the ego, but it will come as a result or combination of the meditation, and the sound of the note will vibrate within the center so distinctly as never to be forgotten. It is again an indication of success. So, attune your inner hearing and wait for that note, or invoke that note even. Invoking the soul, of course, invokes that note. The stimulation of music. Certain sounds shatter and break, certain other sounds stimulate and attract. When the key of a man's life is known, when the sound he responds to is recognized, then comes the possibility of the utilization of sound in refinement. All that is at present possible to those of you who seek to serve is to attend to the above essentials and to seek contact with high vibration. Again, this is from Letters on Occult Meditation, one of the most amazing books in the entire series. But they're all great, of course. And in Discipleship of the New Age, Volume 2, the Tibetan gives some instructions, personal instructions to disciples that he gathered together around mainly New York City in the 1930s and 40s. Had 4 different groups over that period of time, with relative degrees of success in them. But can you imagine getting personal instruction from the master? That's what these Discipleship of the New Age books, the 2 of them, are, in fact. He says to this particular disciple, one of the major linking and blending processes is the creative work of music. I would suggest to you that you bring music into your life far more than you have hitherto done, particularly orchestral music. In these days of radio programs, this is easily accomplished, and the effect of blended instruments and broad sound production on your personality will be to break down the opposition which it presents to soul contact and impose a different note and key upon your life. Does this injunction surprise you, brother of old? You are on the verge of release from the struggle of the past and can enter upon a more constructive and happier phase of living if you permit music to play a major part in your life rhythm. Choose only the best music, such as that played by the great symphony orchestras. God created by the power of sound, and the music of the spheres holds all life in being. Note that phrase. The soul on its tiny scale can create the new man by the power also of sound, and a musical rhythm can usefully be imposed upon the personality of life by the disciple. This is what you need. Music in your life, literally and figuratively. I have here given you a most important hint that the great music of the masters of sound enter in a new and powerful way into your consciousness. If you take this advice in 3 years, if you insist on subjecting yourself to the musical impact, I suggest great and significant changes will be brought about in your life. Once you get away from self-pity and irritation, there is little that is wrong with your thinking. That, my brother, can be said of few. Inspiring passage there, because it can apply to anyone, essentially. Music of the spheres. Planets sing with one another in concert. The great cosmic symphony. Certain types of music will be used when more in connection with sound is understood, but there is no music as yet which will facilitate the work of the soul in abstracting itself from the body through certain notes on the organ, though certain notes on the organ will be found effective. At the exact moment of death, if a person's own note is sounded, it will coordinate the two streams of energy and eventually rupture the life thread. But the knowledge of this is too dangerous to transmit yet and can only later be given. I would indicate the future and the lines along which future occult study will run. That's from Treatise on White Magic. You might have had experiences or dreams where you saw yourself playing a strange instrument with strange sounds emanating from it. When you were in night school, so to speak, in the Hall of Wisdom, many people have reported these kinds of experiences. The new music is on its way. There's some useful books on music. I've taken a lot of the notes of these 3 classes from this book, Music, Its Secret Influence Throughout the Ages by Stuart Scott, who is a well-known English composer who you've probably never heard of. But he also wrote several other books related to the Masters and so forth, which I can thoroughly recommend. You can buy a more modern paperback than this old one here. He wrote this book around about the 1920s or 30s, I think. But it's an incredible wealth of information. His master was Mata Kutumi, the second ray master. The second ray closely related to music, of course. And so he had various transmissions from that master in his various books. The other book here is Music Forms, which I think I've mentioned before to you, by Jeffrey Hodson. And the picture you can see on the cover is in fact a musical form that was built by the Devas in a concert, in a music hall. I think it might have been Bach or something like that. This form was built over the entire when the entire piece was being played over 40 or 50 minutes or something like that. Devas are attracted to that sound, and they stimulate the orchestra. They stimulate the choir as well. This is where humans work unconsciously with the Devas, but it'll be a far more conscious cooperation in the Aquarian age. So God is the divine musician. True music is a temporary expression of his creative word. The whole Deva kingdom work with music and sound in building forms. Angels of music too, the so-called Gandharvas. The music exalts, illumines, or it can degrade, depending on the frequency and of course, the intent behind the music. Now, there's an interesting quote here from Cyril Scott's book. um, where he writes about Plato, musical training writes Plato, who was, of course, um, a Manu type of being, a highly advanced being, is a more potent instrument than any other because rhythm and harmony find their way into the inward places of the soul, on which they mightily fasten, parting grace, making the soul of him who is rightly educated graceful. So pronounced indeed was Plato's opinion of the effects of music that in another part of his Republic book, he says, introduction of a new kind of music, which also included poetry and dancing, must be shunned as impairing the whole state, since styles of music are never disturbed without affecting the most important political institution. Wow, that's quite a stunning statement. So, nor was Plato alone in his opinion, for Aristotle undoubtedly shared it when he wrote, emotions of any kind are produced by melody and rhythm. Therefore, by music a man becomes accustomed to feeling the right emotion. Music has thus the power to form character, and the various kinds of music based on the various modes may be distinguished by the effects on character. One, for example, working in the direction of melancholy, another of effeminacy, one encouraging abandonment, another self-control, another enthusiasm, and so on through the series. We know from all our own listening experience to music right across the spectrum, uh, all the effects that modern music can have in a similar way, whether it's regarding negative feelings or um, positive feelings. Music penetrates auras and stirs up response. The entire Occidental musical system was developed by Pythagoras. You can see him over here on his monochord that he developed. And of course, singing and instrumental works upon the aura, the chakras, the glands, the organs, and the division of tones um, from natural harmonics. Harmonious music relates to the heart, throat, and head. Coarse music, the lower centers. There's another very good book by a guy called David Tame, The Secret Power of Music, which I also gleaned some of these notes from when I read that book, where he discusses jazz, rock and roll, relating to hysteria and mass emotion. Not that I'm knocking those forms of music. There's some very good rock and roll, but generally those forms of music relate to the solar plexus in the sacral center. Poetry is similar to music and is regarded as the language of the angels. The muse of the ancient Greece. Again, we have that muse Mercury theme. Poetry, tone perfect words have a mantric value. And we discussed this mantra theme last week. Poetry, lyrics and music are very powerful together, of course, and the essence of speech, as are all song. The song we may not understand the words in a song, quite often we don't, but they sound good in conjunction with the music that's being played. So there's a very powerful effect on the emotion. So the angels are attracted to aspiring people and inspire them. Musical vibrations touch the etheric body first, and the etheric body, of course, acts as an intermediary to the more subtle body. So now I'm going to try something which I'm not sure is going to work, is playing a piece of music within PowerPoint and from a file on my hard disk. So just bear with me for a moment. Here we have a multi-stringed monochord. okay? Is the volume all right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there are many, many different types of these beautiful instruments, shapes. Some of them are huge. Some of them have been built for people to lie on for sound therapy. Just to give you a taste of that. Then another one that I want to look at is the simple octave on piano, which precedes a section that's coming up in the presentation about the quarter, third, and half tone. So we have a quarter. Can you hear that? Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have the third. And then we have the half. Whoops. All right, just very simple. Now I'm going to stop share and we'll come back to playing a couple of other pieces later. There's no point talking about the theory of music without actually hearing it. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be going through all forms of music. I've got my work cut out looking for all these little small clips, particularly in classical music in the last few centuries, and also modern day music. And of course, on the right here, this picture relates to the various scales of music and is from about the 16th century when a lot of the alchemists and astrologers and esotericists, hermeticists worked with music. Rachel says, what's the significance of those particular intervals, fourth, fifth, and octave? Why did you play those particular ones? They were just examples of various octaves of how you can divide up the monochord, the one-string monochord on that narrow little box. And this is a good tool of teaching for Pythagorean esotericists. They start with that, and they play around with that one string and start to understand the very basis of music. That's my best answer on that for now. Tones, toning, tonic. The tonic is the main note that the other tones emerge from, and they all have important effects on each of the bodies. And according to Cyril Scott or David Tame, I'm not sure which author, the quarter tones were very much the style in ancient India, and apparently this relates to mental metaphysics and philosophy. The third tone, which is that of the ancient Egyptians, was more astral and related to ritual music and occultism, whereas the half tone related more to modern day Europe and the precision of the Germans, for instance, as we'll discuss when we go look at musicians like Bach, and relate to the etheric physical body. So you can see the mental, astral, and physical bodies correspond to these quarter, third, and half tones, broadly speaking. I mean, you could spend, I know I would have to spend probably a week or two of research just to go into really explore that more deeply. So I'm giving you a very superficial idea here, but it's got lots behind it. And alluding to what Plato said before, music precedes eras of nations and religions through the sensitive astral bodies of musicians and poets. Feel the new vibration coming in through some ray or their zodiac sign and their horoscope, and ray cycle, or some planet in some sign, and interpret it accordingly. They receive some inspiration or intuition and translate that into music or poetry. poetry, of course, being the highest form of literature.
Philip, sorry, before
Yes.
you move on, there's a
Hmm.
question in the chat that is
Yeah, thanks.
regarding the intervals that you played before. If you want to answer, please.
Oh, I did answer. That was Rachel's question, I think.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. So, yeah, music is a real science, especially with its understanding its mathematics. Um, Something I just going to mention. Uh, who was that New York conductor? They're making a movie about him right now. Oh, someone let me know on the chat if you know. Let's see now. Leonard Bernstein. Uh, Brilliant man. Ukrainian Jewish family he came from. And his videos are extraordinary to watch, where he either plays piano, but he's one of the best people to learn from in terms of musical appreciation. He is so articulate and succinct, and he was a great conductor, of course. He had some fabulous musical analysis of different composers and different pieces of music that really are so esoteric, really deeply esoteric. And there are many others, of course, that you can find on YouTube who give musical appreciation analyses. Because there's a lot of music, especially classical, that people do not understand. And it's mainly because they haven't developed a musical appreciation. And I speak for myself, of course. So in music, the tonic is the first note of a scale, and the tonal center or final resolution tone that is commonly used in the final cadence in tonal classical music, popular music, and traditional music. Of course, here there's a musical program where people come in and play in old age homes or hospitals, uh, music, the great healer. So here's the tonic on the scale here, and the supertonic, subdominant, and all the rest of the musical jargon, which again, like any science, you have to learn if you really want to get in depth into the music. The beginnings of music and religion. This picture on the right is the Assumption of Mary, which was a national holiday in Portugal a few days ago. Um, Mary, the Queen of Heaven. For ancient humanity, desires, yearnings were not understood. Emotional release was found in song, but very rudimentary. In some unaccountable ways, song or prayers were heard and the person's yearnings were stilled and given emotional relief. Through song and music, a first conception of God or something greater than themselves that were looking after people was realized. Before, this religion had been phallic in that the, quote, the portal through which a child enters the world was the actual giver of life. So we're talking really ancient times, probably right way back in Lemuria. Um, After the discovery of song, there was the conception of the Great Mother who consoled and protected. Then her image was fashioned in wood and stone to worship. Then priests were appointed to guard these idols. And so we have not just Mother Mary, but many other versions of the ancient mother throughout the world. And of course, the mother of the world, the great diva being called the mother of the world. So back in the day, talking back in Atlantean times here probably, priests improved primitive song, transforming it into a species of chanted spell passed orally from generation to generation, and increased religious fervor with the result that people would clasp and sway their bodies. Then an elementary drum was used to accentuate the rhythm with the eventual development of other instruments. Accidental discoveries such as the bamboo, flute, the bow and arrow, uh, relating to stringed instruments also came about over the years. For instance, a broken piece of bamboo in nature, uh, it was noticed that the wind blowing across it was creating a flute sound. And similarly with the string bow and arrow, the twang. So the origins of all stringed instruments. From the beginnings, music was associated with religion. Priests, who were the chosen sensitive ones, eventually heard music of the highest spheres, which led to other instruments developed to express it. Of course, there were the mantras and spells or notes of Atlantean magic. And back in those times, humanity was guided by the initiates, the masters of wisdom, who helped to build with sound. So here we can see these trumpets being blown, which are very similar to the ancient Tibetan trumpets, the great big long ones that they blow in their monasteries today. I think they go way, way back to Atlantean times. Of course, the Tibetan being the remnants, the Tibetans, I should say, being the remnants of the Atlantean root race. And of course, last week I was talking about the walls of Jericho being brought down by an army of soldiers marching around it, stamping their feet for 7 days in a certain direction with horns blowing and other instruments, drums probably being banged, but all in a syncopated beat that built up this energy that brought the walls down. Literally, this is a great example of ancient Atlantean magic. But it was probably carried out within the early subraces of the fifth root race, where there was an overlap between Atlantis and fifth root race. So, Indian music, quarter tones, representing the subtlety of that music. And Dane Rudra, the famous astrologer, one of his books was about the rebirth of Hindu music. Worth a read. I read that years ago. I can't remember what was in it now, but it was good at the time, I remember. When the fifth root race was founded in India, the Manu forbade the playing of existent fourth root race music in order to counteract the black magic of the time. This is similar to what Plato, who was more or less on the same level as the Manu, was saying. There was inaugurated a new scale and science of mantras so the new race could respond to vibrations and reach the mental plane. Chants for the different times of day, for instance. If anyone is familiar with the Agni Hotra ritual that is done just before the dawn and just before sunset every day with ghee and rice and chanting in an inverted copper pyramid, this is one of those ancient rituals. The Indian priests sought to enhance the mantric value of music with repetitive sequences of notes producing profound meditation. Samadhi was achieved, in other words, union with the divine. And this also helped to evolve the exalted philosophies of the Hindus. But according to one commentary from Ruja, the dreamy, meditative Indians remained imbalanced because of music not changing. Of course, it's changing now. Now, I want to just play a little bit more here. So I'm just going to stop this share and reshare. And this is very interesting, called Konakol. Konakol style of singing in India, which you've probably heard. And this relates to these quarter tones.
Ta, di, tum, nam. Tarigidadaga ta, di, tum,
Can we all
nam.
hear that?
Tarigidadaga ta, di, tum, nam. Tarigidadaga ta.
Di tum nam tarikadatam ta di tum nam tarikadatam ta di tum nam tarikadatam.
Tum, nam, tarigidadam ta, di, tum, nam. Tarigidadam ta, di, tum, nam. Tarigidadam ta.
Taditum nam tarikadatam taditum nam tarikadatam taditum nam tarikadatam
Tarigidadam, taditum, nam, tarigidadam.
There you go. Just a small example there. So of course, while we're on the Hindu music subject, there's so many different styles of music and singing in India. It's just extraordinary how rich it is. And these are very, very ancient practices, of course. And they've been, many of them have evolved with modern music as well. There's some very interesting crossover stuff. So we have this master flute player, Hari Prasad Chaurasia, which some of you may be familiar with. Of course, you have the drone playing in the background, and the inducing of a very powerful meditative state, calmness, beauty, taking your imagination into limitless realms. Okay, we'll pause it there. And the reason I'm mentioning this Hindu music is because the Hindus were the first subrace of the fifth root race. So this music is really foundational for all the other Western races that emerged after the first subrace. Now, Egypt, of course, was followed on after, was the second subrace of the fifth root race. So it has many similarities to Hindu music, but of course it's not the same. The noted mythologist, I think it's James Fraser, said every faith has its appropriate music, and the difference between the creeds might also be expressed in musical notation. So here we have the 1/3 tone in Egypt, which is 1 degree less subtle than the Indian and affected more the emotion, whereas the quarter tone is more on the mental plane, apparently. And so this type of music calmed the emotional body, purged it of gross vibrations, intended to induce emotional trance. Here we have music often depicted being played by women in Egypt, and you have various instruments, harp-like instruments, stringed instruments, and so forth. And music in those times was used in the ancient mystery rites, where people left the physical body and traveled upon the astral, visited the astral realms, heaven or hell, descended into hell, rose into heaven, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the Christian tradition, in fact, comes from the Egyptian. In the Indian music, there was an attainment of spiritual bliss, and with the Egyptian, there was an attainment of occult knowledge, magical scientists working with finer and grosser forces. This is because the third and seventh rays were very strong in Egypt, apparently. I mean, we could say that the Indians also were deeply occult. Just depends which way you look at it. Egyptians regarded music as of divine origin, and the kings and initiates expressed it. Again, we have Hermes here, the Ray 4, the lyre, and Osiris, and relating to the flute, apparently. This commentator mentions how mummification as finally practiced was a perversion of occult knowledge, selfishly motivated to keep contact with the preserved form. Apparently, music was connected with Egypt's downfall. Egypt had much music, work, leisure, harvest, and weaving. music was most important in rituals, of course, banquets and weddings, as it is today. But it was far more varied than the Indian, apparently. It had more instruments. The Egyptian temperament, therefore, was balanced. It was what Egyptian music lacked that helped cause its downfall, apparently. It fell because it had concrete knowledge but not spiritual wisdom, according to this author, anyway. So I take this with a grain of salt. Knowledge gives power, which engenders love of power and leads to love of personal power, which disintegrates community. And so we had this going on in Greece, followed later by Rome. Egypt prostituted its occult knowledge. Music began to deteriorate. The one-third tone remained, but it was used for trivial purposes. The priests became power-hungry. The love of beauty decreased in proportion and gave way to gross superstitions and the subjugation of occult forces for evil ends. So the author here is trying to make the point about how the changing of music can change the whole culture and lead to its downfall or its deterioration. So I'll just share some Egyptian music. Ancient Egyptian flute and drum and not sitar, what's it called? It's like a mandolin, a taste of that. Which, interestingly enough, the guy playing it, he's got one of Nicholas Roerch's paintings in the background there. Sound okay? Can we hear that and see that? Thank you. So this is the Egyptian flute as opposed to the Hindu flute. Similar sound, but much more mysterious. Then I'm just going to fast forward here. And these are 1/3 tones that are being played here, I think. So he's doing one of those mixing, self-mixing multi-instrument tracks. All right, so mummification. A very mysterious and strange practice that had negative effects, apparently. So with the Greeks, which are really the foundation of Europe, Greek philosophy, Greek music, of course, Pythagoras, we have the half tone, which related more to the material physical plane as opposed to the astral plane for the Egyptians and the mental plane for the Indians. This style first became perfected as an art here in Greece. Everyone studied music. It was an inherent part of the education. And this relates to the fact that Greece was strongly influenced by the fourth ray, either a fourth ray personality or a fourth ray soul, and with a strong third ray and seventh ray as well. So the Greeks adapted many Egyptian instruments to their own tone because they had a lot of contact with the priests in ancient Egypt. So they adapted the instruments to their own tone, and they had these three scales called the Dorian, the Phrygian, and the Lydian, apparently. Dorian inspired self-esteem and courage and respect for law. Very interesting. Of course, we have the Dorian columns in Greek architecture, which are linked in meaning. The Lydian form induced voluptuous feelings, heavens, and the Phrygian induced repose, dignity, self-control. So that might have been from Cyril Scott, I suspect, using that word, voluptuous. Not all philosophers agreed on the scales, of course, and there is an analogy with modern bands, with the chakras. The drums or bass represent the physical, the base chakra quite often. The reeds, the emotional, the solar plexus. The strings, more mental, but also emotional. Harp and organ, spiritual, emotional. And you have these lovely Greek depictions of music being played, again by women. Not sure how many male musicians there were in those days, but they seem to be always depicted as women playing these instruments. I don't know. There's a guy playing the flute. I think it's a double flute type of thing. However, playing an instrument in a certain way or with others can have a different effect on the different planes. Hence, a half tone working upon the physical doesn't mean that it will not have an indirect effect on the emotions or the mind. A half tone affects our attitude to the physical plane, and the physical perfection was a big thing in Greece, as all the sculpture that it produced reflects, particularly the seventh ray. The seventh ray is the ray of sculpture, of bringing the spirit into matter, literally. And of course, the Italians in the Renaissance reproduced that golden age of Greece during the Italian Renaissance. All Greek art was uncolored by emotions, entirely thought out. Lots of seventh ray, apparently. Egyptian art is not true to nature. It was seen through the emotions. The Greeks were far truer to nature. So the philosophy of ethics was pure reasoning related more to the physical plane, we're told. Concrete mind. Daniel says I play, okay, what? Guitar, piano. Hugh plays piano, guitar, very good. I try and play a bit of flute myself, but I'm pretty hopeless at it. I've tried guitar, piano, lots of things. Next lifetime, I think, musician lifetime. Very good, okay. Singing, of course, is probably one of the most healing, satisfying things that most people can do. Your voice is your instrument. And especially singing in choirs is a great community thing to do, and can be quite exhilarating, according to many people I know who sing in choirs. Guitar, piano, cornet, voice, accordion, my God, okay. And Rachel says, what instruments and types of music have an esoteric basis, and what instruments and kinds of music help to develop the upper chakras? Well, I think they all can. It depends if they're played individually or in an orchestra, of course. It depends, of course, upon the composition. But the violins, of course, one of the main instruments, piano, pretty much any instrument, but you have your main ones that can be, they can all be played in a lower or higher sense. So I'm looking forward to seeing, well, in fact, there are quite a few new instruments around if you go through YouTube. There's some extraordinary things. There's the contrabass flute, for instance, which is a great big pipe about this high that you stand and blow through. It makes this incredible bass flute sound. But there are other ones that are really right out there that are very interesting. So there's almost something new every week these days. I think singing is one of the great ways to really open the heart. Chanting, toning. I might have mentioned toning in a previous class. There are some very good books on toning in terms of toning the different centers. You have to be careful, of course, not to overstimulate certain centers. Of course, the Om is a tone, but there are other tones that are quite easy to say and which can refine that sends toning sense frequencies through the etheric body, the emotional body, and the mental body. So it stirs things up and it refines things. Ruthie says, I sing and was a music major in college, but I switched, just a minute, something's blocking up, I can't read that, switched to major because reading music became very difficult. Yes, it's quite an esoteric scientific formula looking at a sheet of music, is it not? Daniel says, didgeridoo, it's amazing. Very hard to get the circular breathing going on that, but I used to work doing a toning session every Sunday with a group of people in Australia, and one of them was a didge player, in fact, and he used to tone all of us, get us to lie on the floor and tone all of us going from the head right down to the feet, and working on certain centers at times as well. That's quite an experience. I saw a video today when I was researching some of these videos of a guy who developed a monochord, multi-string monochord, that is the size of a massage table, and it's convex on one side, so you can virtually lie in it and have this sound bath from these huge strings, these many strings that are on this instrument. Extraordinary stuff. This is a guy who's a serious student of Pythagorean principles. Of course, Pythagoras was a previous incarnation of the Master Kutumi. I think I mentioned that last week. The Greek mysteries, music was used to stimulate the senses using drums predominating, working directly on the nerves. And then there was dancing and drinking as well, the famous Bacchic rites, which turned into a bacchanalia eventually, an orgy of music and song and drunkenness and so forth. So there were different levels again that the music, and of course this is a bacchanalia of sorts here, with drunken dances by the looks of things, and wine being poured out, and lots of dancing and singing. Popular music of Greece didn't affect initiate schools though, and Pythagoras with his monochord, music was one of the 7 liberal arts. But apparently the Greeks fell through the love of beauty run riot, more into pleasure of the senses, lost sense of reasoning as a consequence. And of course, this was exactly what happened with the fall of Rome, the fall of the Roman Empire. Same thing, if you examine that. Artifice was substituted for art, and true artists were virtuosi, merely embellished music instead of containing substance. And this brought about a radical change in music and apparently moral declines. Music lost its high status about 440 BC. So this is something, of course, that there are probably many books about for the serious student who wants to delve in and is more attuned to history. The Romans apparently fell. This is the Roman Empire, this picture here, which could be also Atlantis. And the Romans kind of recapitulated the fall of Atlantis too. The Romans fell through a perverted love of manliness. They were the most practical in history. They admired manliness, self-restraint, seriousness, industry, and of course they incarnated later as the English, who are still quite restrained. So this manliness is all to do with Mars, the ruler of the 6th ray of devotion and idealism, a strong ray in Rome's history, and of course Mars, martial armies, fighting, swords, armor, all that kind of thing. So they admired, so they obviously produced a high military talent and conquered the whole world practically, of the known world at that time. Then there was the fall of Rome into utmost depravity. They held music in small estimation, so they had a few pipes, apparently. Again, I don't know how true that is, so I take it with a grain of salt. Haven't checked that out. Martial music encourages unusually large number of instruments, especially wind, tuba, buccina, large trumpets and horns. Of course, when many armies in those days marched into battle, they blew bugles and had drummers, and made a lot of racket, essentially. And that type of music energizes the body, gives health, courage, and virility, which of course is a word that comes from virtus, which means manliness. Oh yeah, we'll just finish off today on this page here. Again, we see some picture from ancient Greece or Rome, the zither being played. Rome was an admired body for the usefulness, rays 3 and 7. The Greeks admired body for the beauty, ray 4. Aesthetic versus the practical. Martial music, unless counteracted by more refined influences, leads to manliness and the love of power, and of course, revolution and war. Courage, however, degenerates into brutality. And of course, the gladiator games in the Roman Colosseum are a good example of that. Of course, is associated with sex, virility, sensualism, and the orgies of Nero, one of the most infamous of the Roman emperors who really represented the decline of Rome. And also weakened the physical vehicle that led to cowardice and attracted invaders who came and so nature abhors a vacuum, so to speak. So when there's a decline like that, it automatically, naturally attracts others who will come in and destroy that. It's like almost like the law of the jungle, the law of nature. Apparently, according to Cyril Scott, the degenerate, degraded citherodes or lute and female flautists were a dark page in the history of Rome. So again, I've got no idea. I haven't really explored that. But there may be some truth in what he says. Next week, we'll go into Gregorian and Ambrosian chants. We'll look at the troubadours leading up to the Elizabethans, classical music, all the classical musicians, and hopefully have a better way worked out with the musical clips. Just a few seconds of each one to give people a taste.